They kicked out a black woman, not knowing. She was the CEO and owner. She fired the racist staff. Like and subscribe. She walked in like any other guest, tired, unnoticed, and already carrying the weight of being judged. But what the staff did next would spark the downfall of their own careers. In a matter of minutes, she went from being treated like an unwanted customer to becoming the most powerful person in the building. They mocked her, humiliated her, and kicked her out of a place she silently owned. But the real shock came later, when they realized who she truly was. What happens when racism meets the very woman who controls everything they thought they owned? Monica. Harris had spent years building everything she had. She wasn't born into wealth or comfort. She climbed her way up from nothing, driven by resilience, education, and a quiet determination that no one ever saw coming. Her days were filled with managing hotel staff, responding to clients, and handling business calls from her office overlooking the city skyline. She owned multiple properties, but this one hotel, tucked in a busy downtown district, was her pride. It was the first building she ever bought, a symbol of everything she overcame. To her employees, she wasn't just a boss. She was the person who gave them jobs, encouraged their growth, and built a professional environment that felt like home. Yet outside the walls of her corner office, the world didn't always see her success. On most days, she dressed modestly, blending in with her guests as she walked through the lobby, watching, learning, making sure everything was running smoothly. She took pride in moving silently, but that quiet strength also meant that people often judged her by appearance alone. They didn't know who she was when she walked through the front doors like any other guest. And soon, that very mistake would change everything. For them, not her. Monica decided to visit the hotel that day like a regular guest, wearing simple clothing, her hair tied back, no assistants, no badges, wanting to see how the staff treated people when they thought no one important was watching. She walked through the lobby with quiet confidence, scanning the space, noting every detail the way only an owner could. She approached the front desk to observe how guests were being treated, but before she could even speak, one of the front clerks gave her a cold look, barely lifting his head as if she were an inconvenience. She waited, but the indifference only grew, turning into open irritation. A few other guests walked in behind her. They were greeted warmly, offered help, even smiles. But Monica was ignored. As she moved toward the lounge area to sit down, "And make notes," two staff members whispered as they glanced at her, assuming she was just a random woman taking up space. Their judgment wasn't just careless. It was sharp, dismissive, shaped by prejudice they didn't even bother to hide. She overheard another employee refer to her as one of those people who wander in to take advantage. She felt the sting of it, not just as a professional, but as a black woman who had spent her entire life fighting against that exact stereotype. Still, she remained calm, wanting to observe more. But it got worse. A security guard approached her and gestured toward the door, signaling she needed to leave if she wasn't a paying guest. She tried to explain she had business at the hotel, but he cut her off with a hard stare, motioning for her to exit immediately. Guests watched, some with discomfort, but nobody said a word. She was being escorted out of her own lobby, treated like a trespasser inside the very building she built from the ground up. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she could feel the humiliation burning through her. Not the humiliation of being thrown out, but the injustice of having everything she created turned into a hostile place by the very people she employed. Her hotel, her name, her legacy, now contaminated by the racism of those who thought she was no one. What none of them knew was that she wasn't leaving in defeat. She was headed straight to her office, with a plan that would shake the entire staff to their core. Monica didn't waste a second. She returned straight to her top-floor office, a place the staff rarely visited, a place they forgot even existed. She pulled out the live security footage from the lobby, reviewing every second of how she had been treated. She saw the clerks sneer, the whispers, the guard's aggressive body language. It wasn't just incompetence, it was pure discrimination, boldly carried out in a building that bore her signature on every wall. Within minutes, she sent a direct order to gather the entire hotel staff in the lobby. No one knew who had summoned them, only that it came from top management. The employees gathered, confused, whispering among themselves, and then she entered, not as a stranger this time, but as the woman in full authority. Some recognized her face from framed photos near the elevators. Their confusion turned to fear. Others still didn't know until she stepped forward, holding a printed roster of employees and the legal ownership documents in her hand. Their eyes widened as realization hit. That humiliation they forced upon her, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a direct insult to the very woman who signed their paychecks. And now she was standing right in front of them, with security cameras rolling, watching them tremble in silence. One by one, they stood motionless as if awaiting a sentence. And they were right to be afraid, because in that moment they all began to realize this wasn't a meeting. It was the beginning of their reckoning. Within hours, the staff who had mocked and dismissed her were gone, terminated, not out of vengeance, but out of principle. Monica didn't raise her voice or seek applause. She simply held them accountable, in the exact same space where they had humiliated her. The hotel went quiet that day, not from the absence of staff, but from the weight of realization spreading through every remaining employee. Silence in the face of injustice is its own form of guilt. Monica returned to her office, not with triumph, but with a heavy heart. She had just reminded a building full of people that respect should never depend on wealth, skin color, or appearance. And yet she also knew this was only one incident, one hotel, one moment in time. The deeper injustice was everywhere, happening, in places without cameras, without consequences, and without people like her to expose it. Guests later learned who she was, not through a press release, but through the quiet shock that spread across the industry. Some felt ashamed, others inspired. But Monica didn't need anyone's apology. Her message had already been delivered. Discrimination can cost you everything, even your future. This wasn't just a story about a CEO firing her staff. It was a story about how racism thrives in plain sight, until someone with power and courage chooses to confront it face to face. And before we turn the page, we have to ask ourselves, how many more people need to be humiliated before we finally treat every human being with dignity, no matter what they look like? Stand with justice. Like the video. Subscribe for more powerful stories.